Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, in the studio with us is Charles Sauer, the libertarian economist and president with the Market Institute, marketinstitute.org. You can tweet him at Charles Sauer, S-A-U-E-R, or at Market Institute. And Charles, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
It's always nice having a libertarian voice on the show. As much as I trash you, or whatever the appropriate word is. I mean, we can do it with good humor.
We have a good debate.
I think so too. So, was there any, did President Trump send a tingle up your leg last night? Was there any red meat for libertarians? There was certainly red meat for the military folks. There was red meat for the people who want to privatize schools. I guess that's kind of libertarian. What were the high points from your point of view?
So, I mean, from a libertarian point of view, I think that kind of the dominant feature of the speech is something that we actually oppose, and that's the America First principle. One of the ideas, one of the few parts where Bernie Sanders was clapping, right? But this is something that we oppose. And so the good things he mentioned, like healthcare reform and tax reform and school choice, I think are kind of offset by that America First talking point.
Just to be clear about this, and I think most Americans don't realize this, because the hit is that the Republicans put out, and it's not accurate, is, in fact, but I've heard over and over and over, Frank Luntz must have said, always say this. I've heard at least a dozen Republicans in the last 6 months say, Democrats want open borders. They want people to just pour in here. They want everybody to vote, including people who aren't citizens. None of that is true. The libertarians actually do want open borders. You don't want to recognize national boundaries. You think that labor should be able to travel just as freely as capital can. Do I have that right?
I think that that's exactly right. A business owner should be able to hire who they want to hire in order to run their business, and that anything of the government overreaching and saying who they can hire is too large of a regulatory.
So if I decide that I want to replace Troy and Chris here with people from Mexico who are willing to do the same job for $4 an hour, because that's actually $4 a day is the Mexican minimum wage. So if they work an 8-hour day, they can send 7/8 of their money back to Mexico. Then I should be able to do that in your ideal world.
Well, seeing as how you're
not end up ruining our country.
Seeing as how you're saying that their work output, it would be by doing that, you're saying their work output would be equal to somebody that you could pay $4 an hour to do that. That would be a smart business move. And I would say that the board in your companies should, in fact, force you to do that as a smart business move. But the fact is, you can't replace them for $4 an hour. Maybe I value your producers more than you do, but I think that they're worth something.
Them for $7 or $10 an hour or something. I mean, they're making a lot more.
What you could replace them for is the market wage, which is more than likely what they're making plus a little bit because they've been here for a while.
But if we did away with the border, the market. My point is, if we did it, and this is the problem. Frankly, I think this is the real clear example that disproves your worldview on this, is the Schengen Agreement in the European Union, which says that any member of any EU state can move to any other EU state or country and work at the prevailing prices. And so, you've got these former Soviet states, Poland, for example. I mean, the classic example is the Polish plumber. They actually turned it into an advertising campaign in the UK back about 4 or 5 years ago. In Poland, plumbers make the equivalent of, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's sort of in this neighborhood. Let's say in Poland, plumbers make around $8 or $9 an hour. Okay. In Poland. In the UK, plumbers make actually they probably make more like $20, $25 an hour. Yep. So Polish plumbers go to the UK, and they're more than happy to work for $10 an hour, which is driving down the wages of all the British plumbers, and the British plumbers are going, hey, what the hell? And isn't this one of the reasons why we have national boundaries?
I know that you like people to have floods in their houses and lose the value of their houses, but in the U.S.,
it's really important.
We don't like to do that. What we like to do is have families be able to afford these services. So I know
if the family is headed by a plumber, how can they afford it?
Look, if you're going to force me to hire, let's say, a $1,000 an hour plumber, I'm going to say, maybe I'm going to try to do this myself. But if you let markets
outside of the International Space Station, there aren't any $1,000 an hour plumbers.
Well, I'm not. I can't afford a $1,000 an hour plumber. You might be able to afford a $1,000 an hour plumber, but I could afford somebody that is allowed to compete with them and charge me a lower price. So I mean, we allow price competition, and the markets find find the right wages.
So you're arguing not only to allow, and basically to do a Schengen agreement with the entire world, let anybody from any place in the world come into the United States and work at whatever price can be negotiated, and you want to do away with any of the regulatory protections that. So right now, if we call a plumber to fix our pipes here, we know that plumber at least in Washington D.C. is in all probability a union plumber, at the very least certified by some government agency as competent. You would rather have, correct me if I'm wrong, you would rather have some guy off the street to have the ability to come in and say, hey, I know how to plumb. I know how to do this stuff. Don't look at the fact that I'm using pure lead solder instead of tin.
Look, I want you to have the ability to hire that person. I'm never going to hire that person. I'm going to find somebody that has insurance behind them, is backed by something. And insurance is actually a good reason, because some company... Well, that's because you're paying for quality. It's like buying meat from a guy driving down the street in a truck.
So what you're saying is
you don't buy that meat.
Poor people are stuck with crappy plumbers then.
No, that's not true. Again, the market is going to dictate the level here. Poor people right now in the world that you're describing, poor people don't have access to any plumbers because they can't afford your $20 an hour plumber or your $18 an hour plumber. What I'm saying is, if you allow in the $10 an hour plumber, now poor people have a choice. They can choose no to the $10 an hour plumber, or they can actually take them and take the risk that's going to bring on.
Which they may not know if
I'm giving them the choice.
All of a sudden their pipes are full of lead.
Hey, if you think that you're smarter than everybody else, or if the left thinks that they're smarter than everybody else, that's fine.
No,
but we should give consumers the choice.
My concern is people who aren't smarter. My concern is, most of us don't know anything about plumbing. And if we hired a discount plumber who came in and took some old lead plumbing lines that have been ripped, this city is filled with them, that have been ripped out and thrown away, got them out of a disposal site, and said, hey, I can do your plumbing at half the price, and I've got the pipe with me. Most people might, can't just look at a piece of pipe and go, oh, that's lead pipe.
Yeah, as long as
you want no protections and no pay ceiling.
Look, there's things people should be able to. Maybe they should be licensed when they drive a cart around Costco, so that you don't run into them. Maybe
You're
they should be
facetious.
You're
making my point that you don't want regulation.
No, I don't want regulation, because when you look at the point is, where is the line? Where do you want regulation?
I get your argument, and let me just give you your argument, okay? Let's say we have now changed.
I'm going to put it on my tote board.
We have now changed the laws of the United States. Anybody from any country in the world can come to this country and they can practice any profession they want, right? You got some smart guy in Vietnam who's been mopping floors in the hospital there, but is picked up enough to think that he knows how to do brain surgery. He can come to the United States and you can hire him to deal with the glioma that you've got, right? So now the logical and obvious consequence of all this, that we have no regulation on professions and we have no limits to who can come into the country. The obvious major side effects, setting aside all the, oh my God, I got lead in my water and I've got a plumber, doing brain surgery on me. The more obvious side effect is that it's going to drive down wages right across the board. You drive down wages, you're driving down aggregate demand. The aggregate demand is what drives economies. How does that not kill the economy of the United States?
This is it's fun that we went from well, no, it's a great question. I mean, this is kind of the cornerstone of, I think, the economic debate that we've been having for the last couple of decades. You just asked, is it Keynesianism or supply side economics? And
Adam Smith,
everything that you've proposed makes it more expensive for families to survive. What I'm doing is trying to make it cheaper for families to survive.
Also means that families have higher paychecks.
Yeah, except for the higher paychecks still can't buy anything, because the paychecks don't. What my math does is say, I'm going to give them an opportunity for a job, and they can they can spend that money on what they want. And you're going to say, I'm going to take away the products that they can afford, and then somehow they're going to magically be able to afford them. Look, I want to give people the job all the time. I want them to be able to work. How do you deal with the collapse
of aggregate demand? How do you deal with the collapse? Wages are what drive the economy. People use their paycheck. Typically, people who are making under $40,000 spend 100% of their income. The average American family now, 50%, in the 50th percentile, cannot afford a $1,000 loss. I mean, it will wipe them out. So we got a lot of people who are living right on the edge, and you're coming along saying anybody can compete with you, but you too can hire a plumber to do your brain surgery. How does that, this drives down wages, it drives down the amount of money circulating in the economy. How does that not kill our economy?
Well, first off, what we didn't mention was the demand for jobs. Like if I lived in Mexico today, you can build a Trump wall. You could put whatever you want. You could put the science fiction snipers on the wall. You're not going to stop me from coming in because I have 3 kids and I'm going to do what I can to take care of them. So you can't protect our economy from these people. But what you can do is make sure that the families that you're talking about can afford products, that they can buy things that they can afford. And what this ends up doing is building demand for labor. And so that's what you're missing. It's an aggregate demand, but demand for labor increases. How
does demand for labor increase when people stop buying things because they can't afford them anymore?
No, I want things to come in at a price that people can afford. I want things to be able to be made at a price that people can afford.
Not just poor Troy and Chris over here. Sorry, guys. But if everybody in this city's job or everybody in this country's job is going to be instantly replaced by somebody from another country that's willing to work for literally a third of that wage, what happens to the economy when a third of all the buying power in America vanishes?
All right. Now I'm again going to give Chris and Troy a raise. At the same time, if we give everybody in the city a raise from what they're getting paid now to $100 more an hour, what we do is we don't increase demand just by raising everybody's. We end up raising the price because there's a certain amount of supply. But you also
increase demand. If you look at every single, there's been 34 increases in the minimum wage since it was created in 1935. 34 increases. After every increase, within, if you look at them in two and 3 year blocks, because it takes a couple of years for that increase to work its way in, and frankly most of them were phased in gradually over a 2 or 3 year period. If you look at those 3 year periods, what you find is that over and over and over again, every single one was stimulative to the economy. Why? Because it put more money in the pockets of people who make under $40,000, who spend 100% of their income by buying things. That's your aggregate demand that drives the economy.
It's a good way to cherry pick stuff. Most of the times that we've raised the minimum wage, it's not in when the economy's doing bad. It's times where the economy's doing good, right? And so, talking about that growth, I think
it's been mostly when Democrats had political power. It has nothing to do with the economy.
And I think you've probably said that when Democrats are in power, the economy's doing well. So if we give you that, you can put that on your tote board. But then I get my point that it seems to be that the economy's doing well when we increase the minimum wage. And so, the numbers just kind of go with that as well. Look, we can disagree on this. I don't think the economics back me up. But the fact is if you let people have jobs by giving them, if you make products too expensive for people to buy, right, people stop buying the products. If you make jobs too expensive, look, Wendy's just put in 1,000 new robotic tellers.
Yeah, so
that's 1,000 people out of jobs.
You're coming back to supply side economics. Yeah, okay.
That's where I am.
That's Reagan's scam.
If you have I don't think that's actually correct. Supply
side, Art Laffer invented it over lunch with Reagan on a napkin.
Art Laffer has the Laffer curve, which is about taxation, and that was what was done over lunch, and that wasn't with Reagan, but it was done at a hotel down the street here.
Okay.
The Laffer curve is important, but if we look at supply side economics, it's really just about letting business make choices that are good for them, which is supply side economics.
Okay, so all power to business. Charles Sauer. Okay. All right, I won't put words in your mouth. You can tweet him at Charles Sauer, Sauer. Charles, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And it's marketinstitute.org.